So it was while the first off-campus dojo was Jim Bullock. It's kind of a funny story because the class was up on the stage, and he was there one night with his class, and a lady walked in at the other end of the multi-purpose room and sat on the bleachers just inside the room. So class was over, and he was going to go down and talk to her. She sat through the whole class, and so he jumped off the stage to go talk to her. Out the door, she's gone. Next night, she's back, and so he jumped off the stage to go talk to her again. She's gone. Next day she's back. She's got her son. And so at the end of class, she's dragging him from the door up to the stage, and I can't remember his name, but he says he's going to take. No. Well, come to find out, her dad was a 6th degree kendo in Japan, and so she grew up with martial arts, and and Jim ran a really tight ship. I mean, it was like he was like a drill instructor, and she really appreciated that. So good for her kid too. So, and Jim says, yeah, he said after the first night he was out after my job. So anyway, so there's the David Judokai, and then from there, I don't know who. When we left.
Well, no, before that, we were very involved because we didn't have our first until we were married for 5 years. We didn't together for 3 years before that, and so we did lots of tournaments and went to clinics and black belt classes were at 6 o'clock in the morning. And when you had to travel, and if you weren't there, it was over with at 10. Too bad. You might as well not even come in. Because that's how Prof. Estes used to run his classes. And then Bud used to sit up late at night typing out the AJJF bulletin. And I finally told Tom, I said, I can type the bulletin. So we took over the bulletin from Prof. Estes, so it kind of eased him. And then we decided, well, I don't really like the AJJF bulletin. So we put a contest out and said, anybody who comes up with a good, name for our martial arts magazine, and someone came up with Ki Echo, and I went, the Echo.
What year was this, Jan?
1965. So we said, we still have all the old AJJF bulletins and all the old Ki Echoes.
Mm-hmm.
So Thompson wanted me to recycle them, and I'm going, no, somebody's going to want them someday.
Have they been scanned yet?
We're working on that. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, another thing, because I'm a teacher and he's...
Well, wait a minute. Go on with the Ki Echo. So once a month,
that's right.
when we published, we brought everything down to the dojo, and the dojo did all the stapling, all the licking the stamps, and all the addresses.
Wax on, wax off, huh?
Yeah.
We took a night of class.
And it was every month.
And they told them that was called Kokula.
I love it. So then I got pregnant with our first, and Bob said, would you like me to take that over? And I'm going, were you really?
I don't remember it that way. I was standing in the hospital because I worked there. And the phone rang. It's for you, Bob. It's Tom on the phone. And Tom says, you know how every summer we go up to Jan's ranch because school's out. They were both school teachers. Yes. We've decided to stay. The school is yours. Okay. So there's a certain amount of filial piety.
Filial duty.
Yes. We are the slave of duty. And so, of course, because Tom had done so much for me, that I said, of course, after thinking, 4 seconds. My wife was standing right there, and she says, okay, which was very nice of her because, unlike Jan, she was not a good jiu-jitsu student. And but she allowed me to go out 3 nights a week and teach the class. We took a nationwide trip in 1974 or so. Yes, there were people then. East, and I met Ramon Ancho. He taught a class, which I learned an enormous amount. And we met a lot of other people, Bill Gessner and some other people whose names you kind of go, like, who? And so that was very nice. We traveled around. I think that it was indeed a class, a university class, until finally the department of head of physical education said, "I'm sorry, we can't have your class anymore." Okay, you don't give much reason. So that was pretty much it. We did kata contests, and we did this and we did that. Until finally I had enough children, and my wife was getting ill, and so I said I have to leave the school, and so Steve Mertens kindly took it over, probably under the same duress.
Bob, what was the span of years on that?
1973 to 76 and a half, about August. I walked into, on April 12, 1967, I walked in and saw Tom, and I said, "Is this the judo school?" And he says, "No, it's jiu-jitsu." I said, "Oh," because I, like most young gentlemen in high school, I fooled around with this and that. But I stayed because it was great. So thank you.
When did you learn lap gok?
Which?
Lap gok. Lap gok. Somewhere I've got your treatise on lap gok.
Bob came up with all these. We even had a purple belt I looked for that had diamonds and circles and everything around it, and you.
That was Vic, I'm sure.
And
No,
you
I invented
donated it
Akiwazara.
to somebody. I can't remember what it was for.
Akiwazara was a fictitious martial art that didn't work.
Oh, that was a good one too. Yeah.
And there was lots and lots of throws. I don't know. We just had a lot of fun, and it helped take some of the stress out of the difficulty of actually learning what was real. So, anyway, that was that.
Well, another thing we started to do also is when we had conventions, because when we used to go to conventions, the white belts were in one room, the blue belts were in another, the green belts, the brown belts, the black belts, and that was it. But going to college classes through universities and colleges, I said, well, why don't we bring in, have designs on these different ones and have specialties so people can go here, go there. I mean, they still had to have a rank, but give it some flower to it. And so we did. We hosted a convention here in Vegas, and it was very well taken. We invited the Iaido instructor who was here visiting from Japan, and he was glorious because a lot of our students hadn't really been exposed to other martial arts because of us. Oh no, you don't want to take judo. You don't want to take aikido. Take jiu-jitsu. Anyway, so we started that going too, I think, in the conventions. And then we had our second child. We were doing kids camp up in beautiful Siskiyou County, if anybody wants to come visit. And Tom got a job at my old high school, and it took us one evening.
Sort of.
Well, I didn't want to have a babysitter for my child. So my father had been coming down from Reno taking care of our first all those years, for 5 years, and he finally said, I can't do it anymore. Okay. And then he got the job.
So, and then, of course, then Shingi Khan got started up in the valley up there. But the job business was kind of interesting. We had a counselor at camp that had a best friend of his was in the hospital in San Francisco, and the roommate of his friend was a teacher from the high schools in Scott Valley. And so they got to talking, and Mark, my cousin said, there's a possible job opening up there. So the teacher that was in the hospital was a teacher from the high school, was a high stakes gambler in San Francisco, closed room and everything. somebody accused him of cheating at cards and came across the table with a knife, cut off the bottom part of his heart, so he was in the hospital recovering. And okay. So there's a possible job opening. So Jan had to go shopping for camp, and so she said, well, I'll just stop in at the school and see if there's anything available. Well, there was. They called me that was a Thursday.
That was your mom.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Evelyn Creshu, John Creshu's
Yeah, there's a
mother.
lot of connections.
Yeah. So Evelyn called and said, yeah, well, we'll set up an interview on Friday. So Jan goes shopping Thursday, interview on Friday, 10 o'clock in the morning I go in for my interview. New principal superintendent is there, and the new principal, he's there, and I get interviewed. 11 o'clock I walk out of the interview, and here's the next guy in line sitting there. And I took one look at him and said, they're not going to give him the job.
Wow, that's self-confidence for you. There you go.
That was something, and I thought, no. So I got home and I said, Jan, they're going to call us. Sure enough, that afternoon they called me, and Monday morning I signed the contract.
Did they pay you then?
They paid me. So 28 years later, I retired from there, and Jan spent an additional time being mom to kindergartners. So I was on my way to work one morning, and I had to stop by and either give her something or pick something up to take it to the high school, whatever. And this little boy comes up and grabs Jan around the legs. Mrs. Ball, I love you. And I'm thinking, that would never go over very well at the high school.
Yes.
So let's hand it on to Steve. Tell us your experience.
I had one more thing before we start. Sorry, and that is, it occurred to me that everybody needs someone who is not their parent. They need an adult who is not their parent to help them grow in life. And for me, that was Tom and Jan. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rose.
And the nice thing about being in jiu-jitsu, we get lots of those folks. I mean, we get dozens of those people who will help us along because of the ohana. Thank you all.
There,
Quick
now you can
question
do it.
before we move on. Do you two remember who was promoted to rank, like black belt ranks at that time? Like I'm assuming you're a black belt, but I don't know. But
I promoted him.
okay, because those little connections would be neat. So you got your black belt from Professor Ball and Jan Ball. Okay. And then, can you, when you're doing your thing, can you mention who? Because I don't know. Like, I know he's a black belt, but I don't know when or where it came from.
Vic, raise your hand. He was one of our first students.
Okay.
Sutwana, one of our first students. We had to go through the UC alumni and try and find these people, and all I knew is approximately when they graduated. But they found Susan. They found a couple others, but they couldn't make it, and the others are off in the woodwork somewhere. I hope they come someday.
Go, Steve.
So I got my black belt from John Ball, 1975, I believe, and I had no knowledge of jiu-jitsu or anything of that nature, and I had a girlfriend at the time who was taking the PE class of jiu-jitsu, and I was always interested in new things, so I went to check out the class one evening, and I still can feel what I felt. And those of you who've been around know what I'm talking about, and that is the dojo was in the wrestling room of the older gym at UC Davis. So it was a wrestling room. And I walked in the door, And I knew I was in the presence of something different. I now know that it was chi. And the room was just suffused with chi. And I knew, I didn't know what it was, but I felt it. And I just said, I'm home. I mean, I didn't need a home, I was home. But I mean, this is my new home. So I became an avid student and worked out. And Tom left when I was a green belt. And at that time, anybody green belt or above had a choice, whether to stay as Tom's student or transfer to be Bob's student. And I chose to remain Tom's student, so I worked out with Bob. And those were great years. Bob's an excellent sensei and has some tremendous skills that very few people have. Very few people. Oh, shucks. And for those of you who have heard of and not experienced it, back in the day, Bob was one of those who, if you were having trouble with art, he could be light as a feather. And if you were a little cocky, heavier. He was an embedded stone. He was immovable. Same frame as you're looking at today. Spider. And so you know, I've had a number of those experiences in my career. So you know, I got my black belt, and we all knew that Bob was somewhat temporary. We knew his wife was ill and all that, and so I was asked to take over the dojo and did so. And had met Carol by that time, and so Carol and I were married in '75. And the odd thing is that the dojo, the relationship with the university changed. And we could no longer work out in the wrestling room. They had built a new gymnasium, and it was a very strange situation where they had a big basketball court and bleachers on the ground floor. And then up above they had a mezzanine level on which they had spaces. And they'd have 3 or 4 or 5 different classes going on. There'd be a karate class over there, and a dance class over there, and our class right over here, and another class of something else over there, all in open space. It was very unusual. So we worked out there for quite a while, and then I can't remember why that ended, but we had to get space in town for a couple of years, and then we did end up back at that gymnasium again. So it was really hit and miss. We worked out regularly. That was not hit and miss. We worked out regularly, but the location changed. And so then Carol and I had been working on a plan to open a residential treatment facility for emotionally disturbed adolescents. And that all came to fruition. We bought the property in late '78 and worked through the development of the property through '79. So we moved in 1979 to complete the construction of the facility and to open the facility. Huh?
Is it
Oakendale. Oakendale. Yes. And so we opened that, actually opened it in April 1980. And so there was no successor at the time. There was no successor from the Davis Judo time who could step in. So some students went to Sacramento and worked out with Bob.
What about Hans?
No, Hans was gone.
Hans sent me to work out with Bob because Hans had moved to Santa Rosa, St. Helena.
Yeah.
So Bob was the
Yep.
Bob was the kind of de facto.
By default.
Yeah. He like the first time I walked in, he goes, "Rich, will you do something with this guy?" Rich was really nice to me. He was really nice.
What's your name?
Rich who?
Rich Young. Yeah.
So Bob Leake and Steve Mertens, who was running the town dojo when you were in charge of the university dojo? It was there one.
Yes, there was.
Hans Schaffron
was running the dojo in town.
Until he left.
Until he left.
And it was me and Martin.
When?
No, Jeff Taylor had it after that.
let's see, should have been somewhere around. Well, Hans took.
They're
took
coming
it
to get you.
over in probably 70.
Okay.
So
There
well,
were for a time.
we were the kids club basically because it was through the city, and adults didn't do it. Right? It was just us kids that wanted to do kung fu and all the stuff that they didn't have. We took jiu-jitsu. That's what I think we got jiu-jitsu. What do you think of that? Oh, that's what we thought of it until we did it. So I think Jim had just left, and then there was some. I don't know if you guys remember. I remember some guy named Paul. My very first
Paul Hope.
summer.
Paul Hope.
Okay.
That's right.
So, and he did it my first summer in the city, and then he was gone. And this,
You were one of my first students.
I was your student at school.
No,
I was
really?
your like first or second grade
Okay, I thought you were
student.
in jiu-jitsu class too. You were too young.
Yeah, I think I started after that. You had probably Martin,
Yes.
and you had my sister in your
Right.
class too, and Peggy. And so anyway, so Paul was the first guy, and then this guy shows up, and all we had learned was this: punch, punch, punch. Didn't learn to block, didn't learn anything. So Han shows up with a stick, and he goes, "I have to know what you know." And so I'm watching all these guys, and they're going, "Yeah, yeah," and I've never seen that. So he swings at me, and I go, "Yeah," and he cracks me in the ribs with it. And so I go, "Yeah," and he cracks me in the head with it. And he goes, "You're demoted. Come back to the kids' class." That was my first. With my sensei Hans, who was there till must have been 79, 78 or 79 that he moved to Napa, and that's when he said. And that's when I was trying to get ready for my black belt. And so I'd go to him on the weekends, spend the weekends with Hans. I teach the city class with Martin and Tobin. Remember Martin and Tobin?
Tobin Sosman.
And that's where you were there and you were there. So we have representation from Sarah and Tommy. And then on the other two nights, I'd go to Sacramento. Because he said, you gotta train with the people that are doing the judokai stuff. Because mine was like, I was doing weird stuff.
No.
Still are.
Yeah. Can you do something with this? I had many. So, and here's the other thing. Every time I hooked up with a sensei, they moved. Not just once, sometimes twice.
It was easy.
Or 3 times. So
After
I
Hans
had
was,
sort of a way with
Jeff
that.
Taylor.
So, and then I think when I had my daughter, did Jeff Taylor take it over?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was Jeff Taylor, right? At the city.
Year?
And then, the city group. And then I don't know what happened after that until Mike invited me back to the judokai because I was working out with Dennis.
Okay, so when did you take over?
Well, it was an interim.
So,
Maybe
I'll speak. Sure. So how did I fit in all that?
Yeah.
It was interesting. You guys are circumventing there.
Yeah,
So I think the reason they're doing that, to be fair, is that I wasn't a student of Professor Ball. So we have a certain camaraderie. We're all brothers. But my position was I was trained by other people, and then about 1978, I think. I had met, so let's continue.
Bob,
Talk
a little louder.
Let's talk about Steve's story about Key. So I went to a convention, I don't know, 1977. And I remember walking in, when you go to conventions, you don't typically have your shoes on, right? Sandals maybe. But I was barefoot in gi, and we're all coming in as a group. I had a dojo in Sacramento. And I could feel something in my feet. And everybody's talking, but I'm not listening because I'm paying attention to this very odd sensation. And after about a minute, everybody's talking to me. You know how it is when you're not listening, which I obviously don't do that a lot. But anyway, I thought I recognized it was a voice. It was somebody's voice. It was reverberating through the floor. And I said to everybody, "Tell you what, I'm gonna go. I gotta figure this out." So I followed it, like literally, like, where was it stronger, weaker, stronger, you know, hot, cold. And I eventually, yeah, kind of like the and there was, you know how the convention they have those the slatted doors, they're folded, and then they have the little metal, like the magnets, and you can open and close for the convention classes. And there was somebody in there talking, and that was the voice. I couldn't stand it, so I opened it up and looked inside. It was Professor Ball. And you know how convention classes are. It's a big area, you know, a lot of people on the mat. And he's talking, and I quietly stuck my head in, and he stops. And he turns around and he looks at me. I'm like, sorry. And he goes, that's what he did. He nodded yes. So it took me about 1.5 years. I finally called him and asked him to be my sensei. I was like dating, you know. I was like shy, you know. Well, no, don't take that wrong. I said like. You got to hear the opposite word in there. And I talked to him for about an hour. And finally I said, well, would you consider? And he goes, yeah. You know, because he'd been on the phone for an hour. Jan was probably going, what are you guys talking about? He was trying to ask me to be a sensei. He's shy. So eventually, we did. And I've been his student ever since. And so that was my connection to Davis, because he's become my sensei. And so the people at Davis thought it was a natural conclusion and logical sequence to come see me. And so as Steve was, and I had met Steve, we talked about it. I do remember the conversation. We did speak to it. He gave me some recommendations, made some suggestions to me on what to do. I did the best I could with it, and I did that for a period of time. They would come to Sacramento. I would go down to Davis. But what I can tell you is that Davis was like an entity. He wasn't going to die. And I was just one more piece of the puzzle in that sense. And I don't know exactly how long that happened, but that went for a period. And then, to transition, that would be to Dennis Sensei Kami-tan.
When he gets his turn, I got something to say about the history. So.
Done. Go.
So this is the history of martial arts at UC Davis. When I first started there in 1964, I was told that this was the first martial art group there at UC Davis since World War II. Wow. And I think we even have some uniforms. So they went down in the archives and they brought out musty, oh, they were horrible. They were like in a trunk or something, but Jan washed them all up and cleaned them up and put some good smelling, you know, made them smell good. And then people that needed uniforms, we just said, well, here, wow. This is from like way. No, they were good by then. So.
Did they look like these?
Yeah, they were little. Some of the little threads were coming loose. You had to kind of cut them off, but they were well used apparently. So history, and then within a week or 2 weeks of opening the dojo there, the workout on the wrestling room, Steve Fox brought Kempo karate to there, and then from there was Aikido, and then there was this, and since then there's been a plethora of martial arts there at UC Davis that goes way back to World War II. Anyway, so Dennis.
Okay. Well, you're the only crowd that would appreciate my story, but it's not about me, but I have to tell these stories. I showed Tom today. I actually started judo, sport judo, when I was about 14 years old. So I have an AJJF card in there from 1964, 14. So I had learned some falling and some throwing, you know, it was 64 was the first Olympic year for judo.
That's right.
So
Who was
that's
your sensei?
got, his name was Lester Lucas, and it was two brothers. One was Lester Lucas. So I came to Davis, and I was taking a class in gymnastics, and they were trying to teach us how to tumble. And I took a bad fall, and I stymied just from remembering it. And someone says, "What is that?" And I said, "Oh, I learned that. Yeah, I was in judo, yada yada." And then they said, "Well, they have a judo class here." And I said, "They think you can get credit for it. You can get student credit for it." I said, "Okay, sounds good." So I go in, and I never will forget this. It's like the first time you see something, it's implanted in my mind. I walked in Hickey Gym into that wrestling room. Tom Ball was standing on the side, and he was talking to, maybe it was Bob and two other people, saying, "Okay, where does your thigh go for a Hanigoshi or a Sotomomo Harai?" I never will forget that.
We still have that conversation.
Well, that was my first experience. So what do? I have no gi, so I go down to the locker room at UC Davis, and I would borrow a gi to work out. And they didn't wash these things every week. So I would go in, and a few times, I mean literally,
Whoa,
it's like,
yeah.
"Hey, I put this on." So that was my start with Davis Judokai. Now, a real quick story. When I took my green belt exam, I handed my notebook in. I thought I passed the test. You never asked if you passed the test. And a year goes by. And finally, I think it was Bob Leake says to Tom, it's like, "When are you going to promote Dennis?" He goes, "Well, he hasn't taken his test yet." So, "Yes, he has." It was a year ago. Oh my gosh. Anyway, that's my story.
I still resent that. Not that he's resentful. Yeah. I'm so glad, Tom, I got a chance to tell you.
One reason being is, I think it was a story you told me one time that you had a sensei that said, "Well, if you think you deserve it, put the belt on."
Ooh.
And I never forgot that. I never
Yeah.
forgot that.
He never has either. He still tells that story.
He does.
Okay, so I was there when Tom left, Tom and Jan left, and then I left. I moved to Los Angeles, and I believe I was a NICU, and I went down and I ended up at Bill Randall School in Santa Monica. So I was working out with Bill Randall. And I guess I was young and ambitious and maybe a little cocky. I thought, okay. I found out kind of through the grapevine that at that time, Bill Randall had promoted 3 people to black belt in 10 years. So I thought, I'm the new kid on the block. I just showed up. I thought, okay, well, this is nice. So I ended up, I believe Bob Leake promoted me to EQ. I believe so. So somehow, some way, I got the courage to ask Professor Randall. I said, "Is it all right if I finish getting my black belt from Tom?" So he agreed, and so what happened is, over that time, I think it was 1975, I went to camp, and Tom gave me the exam. Pat Brown was there, I remember. And I have to tell you this story. Again, you're the only people that could relate to this. So we're going to do the Kiai no Maki. So there's no concrete block. So Tom finds a slab of, it's a shale or something. It breaks off the sheet.
I think I remember this. I think I was there too.
So there I am between the chairs. There's Tom.
Bam!
Bam. Keeps hitting it. It's not shattering. Finally, he hits it. I don't know if you remember. He hits it. He bends over. He says, "I just hit myself in the nuts." He says, "Do you want to go on?" I guess I did the only one. So I did get promoted to black belt. I went back to Los Angeles, remained a student of Bill Randall's, and then finally when I moved, I think it was in 1979, I finally moved back up to Sacramento. And then I met Bob, or knew Bob from here, and then Bob and I talked, and I thought, well, okay, I guess I could do that. I mean, it would be an honor to be a sensei of a school that I grew up in, so that's how I became sensei of Davis Judokai. I was living in Sacramento, and this is where I'm really weak on the years that had occurred. But I did that for a while, and then at some point in time, I don't know how this happened, but I was talking to Professor Don Cross, and Don Cross had Fudoshin at that time.
Fudoshin, yeah.
And he was changing it to like Sacramento Jiu-Jitsu Center. So Don Cross asked me if I would become sensei of Sacramento Jiu-Jitsu Center with Cheryl Orsino, which was Cheryl Hager. So somehow I ended up just kind of fading away from Davis Judokai, and a number of people from Davis were coming up to Sacramento, working out at Sacramento Jiu-Jitsu Center. So that's kind of my place in Davis Judokai.
That was 1984-85.
Yeah, I need somebody to tell me that, but I don't really. It was
about 85 because we had Leilani.
It wasn't like exactly.
Yeah, I remember Cheryl and I. Yeah, 85 because Cheryl, we had Leilani and she had her little girls. They were the same age.
April, yeah.
Little April.
Yeah. So that was my role, I guess.
But then from there it became Michael Folka.
Yeah. Well, we got
Where's Mike?
the other thing that happened is they booted us out of the gym again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were in Sacramento for a long time, for a while.
But it's still called the Davis Judokai?
Well, you were in your garage, weren't you?
I don't remember.
You were in your garage in the apartment on L Street.
I got to piggyback on a story that Dennis told about the block breaking. Because I took my black belt exam at camp as well, and there was no cinder block or other building block. Tom goes and gets a river rock. A river rock. It is smooth, it is worn, it is ancient. And there I am between the chairs. And he goes, he didn't get a sledgehammer, he gets a hammer, it's got a little head out like that.
It's a rock hammer.
A rock hammer, right?
Yeah.
And he starts wailing on this rock, with this rock hammer. 15 blows.
I can't get both of them.
He says maybe better find a different sledgehammer. And he went and he got a regular sledgehammer and one shot and he just crumbled it. Oh my God. 15 or 20 shots with that thing.
You're beginning to see a pattern here.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, Richard Hager took his. Same thing. I was whacking 14 blows, and it finally gave way. It was reinforced with rebar.
Beware of senseis.
We had no idea until it broke around the rebar.
I think we were told, be prepared, bring your own cinder block.
I think you're right, Randy.
Bring your own, man.
So, Michael, your story?
Oh, let's see. Start from the beginning.
Well, start from the dojo.
I started jiu-jitsu in, when I was in high school. I kept talking about all this stuff, martial arts, and my dad got tired of hearing about it and says, go do it, and go out. And so I shopped around and I found Prof. Redmond, martial arts student in Livermore, California. And so the first thing that he did was he made me watch 2 classes.